Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to today's Battle Rhythm, Measuring Impact, a veterans nonprofit journey through evaluation. Today's Battle Rhythm will be hosted by Jeanette Gillis. Jeanette is the director of the network at America's Warrior Partnership. The network provides local veteran servant organizations with a connection to national resources when a veteran's request cannot be met locally. To find out more, please visit americaswarriorpartnership.org/the network. That's it for me. I am going to pass the floor to Jeanette.
Hello, everyone. Happy June. If you can believe that we're in June already. I know I can't. So I'd like to welcome all of you here today, all of our affiliate communities, 4-Star Alliance members, VSOs, and as well as our guests that are joining us today. We're very lucky today to have subject matter expert Alaina Wilson. Alaina is the Director of Veteran and First Responder Programs at Higher Ground. Higher Ground has been working through its evaluation for the last few years, emphasizing rigorous impact measurement to ensure programs stay aligned with their mission to improve the lives of veterans through therapeutic recreation. Throughout today's session, we'll be conducting some polling and sharing the answers. Please feel free to add questions in the chat for Alaina. And at the end of today's Battle Rhythm, we've got an extra special treat for you. We're going to have Catherine Ray from Progressive Insurance. She will be sharing the Keys to Progressive program and let you know how you can assist a veteran in applying. The Keys to Progressive program is a program that awards veterans in need with a vehicle once a year. So she'll tell us more about that, and we will figure out how we can get your veterans enrolled so that they have a chance on November 11th of being one of those lucky recipients. So I pass the presentation to Alaina.
Thanks. All right. So as Jeanette mentioned, my name is Alaina Wilson. Calling me a subject matter expert on research is probably a stretch, but I'll tell you about our journey through developing evaluation and hopefully, be able to shed a little bit of light on how we were able to do it and how it's been beneficial to us. So definitely a good case study. So I think I'm preaching to the choir probably a little bit here on why evaluation matters. But there's a couple things that really helped us hone in on doing this kind of evaluation. So I think the biggest thing that really helped us is the fact that it's really important for donor development, especially in seeking corporate sponsorship. That ability to show quantitative impact on top of what we'd been gathering for years as anecdotal or qualitative impact was really helpful in coming up with the funds to make this happen. So funders want it, communities deserve it, leaders need it. It has helped us to better tell our story. It has helped us learn and improve our programs. And we're hoping that we're still in the early phases of like our first iteration of results from it, but we will be taking this evaluation data to help secure funding for our program. So I personally think it's really important to be super clear on your why, because the road can be a little sticky along the way. And if you know why you're doing it, you'll stay strong through the ups and downs of figuring out really good evaluation. So Allison, now, without much further ado, I'd say we can do that poll question, asking you all, how confident are you in your organization's current ability to measure impact? And while those answers trickle in, I'll talk a little bit about who we are at Higher Ground. So Higher Ground, our mission is to enhance quality of life through therapeutic recreation and education. Whoops, something got in my slide. That's supposed to be a video link, but at education that ends. So Higher Ground enhances quality of life through therapeutic recreation and education. So we focus on serving veterans, first responders, and people with disabilities throughout the country. And our evaluation has been developed around our veteran week-long therapeutic retreats. So it looks like almost half of you are very confident in your organization's ability to measure impact, which is amazing. And 30% would say somewhat confident. So Hopefully some of you are also already implementing evaluation, and this is just one more example into that bucket. So we have operated as an organization since 1999, so we're coming into our 26th year, and we have been confident for a number of years that we run great programs, but it's really easily said when we're heavily involved in the running of those programs, and we're now trying to get to that phase, or we are now in this phase of proving that we have improved impact, that we have a positive influence on our participants. So for those of you who aren't familiar with Higher Ground, we started as an adaptive ski organization, and we've grown into a national nonprofit serving veterans and first responders all over the country. And we have sort of a flagship week-long therapeutic retreat for veterans and first responders and their significant others, and then 3 years of follow-up with those participants after their program. So our evaluation measures their attendance of that week-long program, post, we check in at 3 months, 6 months, and 12 months. So some common challenges that people run into in implementing evaluation would be not enough money, time, or staff, too much jargon, not enough clarity. So figuring out, especially around like if you're trying to choose measures to evaluate your program, diving into that world of literature, research literature is sticky waters. Knowing how to utilize the data, like having it feel useful in telling your story, worrying about doing it wrong, and lack of buy-in from staff or clients. Certainly that's one thing I'll touch on is, as we went into this journey, we had some key staff really involved in developing our evaluation. Once we got through that first pilot phase and we were having all staff involved in it, a big thing to be prepared for is getting the buy-in of all of your staff that will be involved in implementing your evaluation. And then finding the right partner potentially to make it happen. For us, that was huge in our journey. We had wanted to do evaluation for a long time, but our staff didn't, to that point about the jargon, to that point about getting the buy-in from staff, we didn't always have the skill sets among our staff to really decide the measures and develop the evaluation. So we were lucky to partner with 2 PhD level rec therapists, researchers out of UNC Wilmington and Clemson University. So that was Brent Hawkins and Jasmine Townsend, who we contracted with to help develop this evaluation. And we really got them involved in the ins and outs of our program. So this was our approach to evaluation, was to start with what we already had established. Our program had an established guidelines of practice, which was really helpful in outlining what we do and how we do it. And so Brent and Jasmine were able to look into that to figure out what are some of the things that they could be measuring in our program model. So outlining our program goals was part of that guidelines of practice, and that was a lot of what informed the measures that we used to evaluate our program. We had been conducting a less formal type of evaluation for years, where we were getting, more text box responses from participants about what they liked, what they didn't like, what we could do better. So that information also really helped to inform, what participants felt like was impactful in our program, and inform things that we could measure. And then we assessed specific measures to evaluate our program, and we learned and adapted through 2 pilot phases. So something I want to point out here, we started, like I mentioned, really looking at that guidelines of practice and our program goals to identify the measures that we implemented in our evaluation. And I'll get into our methodology and our measures, but quickly before I get to those slides, what we've landed on are to assess a depression and anxiety scale, a post-traumatic growth scale, a general self-efficacy scale, and a social connectedness. In our first pilot phase, that social connectedness measure we were using a community reintegration measure. So these are all peer-reviewed, established measures that Higher Ground didn't build, but that matched up with things that we felt like we had an impact on. Community reintegration was one of our program goals. As we got into looking at a form of evaluation around community reintegration, we really realized that actually what we were doing was not community reintegration, because we were bringing veterans from all over the country to a week-long program where they got together with people, the community, and then we made efforts in our follow-up process to connect veterans with their home community. That's where we landed on this goal of community reintegration. Like, hey, you loved skiing here. Let's connect you with a ski program at home. Or you like horses. There's this equine program in your area. But as we did that first pilot phase of our study and got honest with ourselves, we weren't that great at community reintegration. We took them out of their community and flew them into a little unit, a new little community for a week. But what we were really good at was social connectedness. We helped the veterans and first responders form connections with people, talk openly with people, feel like they were around people that they trusted. So what we were improving was their feelings of social connectedness, not necessarily their reintegration in their community. Hopefully those feelings of social connectedness help them to reintegrate into their community, but we found a new measure around social connectedness that really more appropriately spoke to what we did at Higher Ground. So a cool learning lesson for us in this evaluation process was, our program goals, our guidelines of practice informed our veteran impact surveys, what we call our evaluation, but also our veteran impact survey informed our guidelines of practice and our program goals, helped us really hone in on what we do at Higher Ground and what we do well. So as we developed this evaluation, I sort of alluded to this earlier, but we made it a part of our culture. So in developing the evaluation, we are a rec therapy program, community nonprofit, and we worked with PhD rec therapy researchers. So they got what we do, and they put a lot of thought, and we put a lot of thought into how can this veteran impact survey be a seamless part of our programming. So we utilize a workbook in our programming, and we built the veteran impact survey into our final discussion group. We talked about it not only as useful information for Higher Ground, but also useful information for the participants, because they got to see how they changed over the course of our program. When they do that survey at the end of our program, they get to see how their feelings of general self-efficacy improve. They get to see how their post-traumatic growth improves. They get to see how their depression and anxiety symptoms decreased or their sense of well-being improved. And they got to see how their feelings of social connectedness improved. So it wasn't just something that served Higher Ground. It was built into our program to also benefit our participants, for them to see these numbers, this change in themselves, have that measured. We sought staff input and really empowered them as we rolled this out, which led to us creating a staff implementation guide. This wasn't in our initial plan, but as we started to do it, we realized that the way in which we roll out our evaluation is as important as the evaluation itself. So having our staff be consistent in how we introduce it, how we speak to it. Those first couple iterations, it's a tedious survey. Like, participants aren't chomping at the bit to go through 4 different measures and all of the demographic questions that come along with it. So it was important that we told the story about how this benefited them, how it benefited Higher Ground, and also that we wanted them to answer and complete it honestly, that this wasn't about them paying lip service to us, but really it was meaningful information for our program. So that staff implementation guide was incredibly important in our success with our veteran impact survey. So we celebrated learning, not just proving, kind of at that point. Like, we weren't looking for them to fill us with hot air. We wanted to really see what happened. We wanted to be better for the process, not just show that we were great, but to find where we could learn and improve. As evaluation has really been embedded in our culture at Higher Ground, we already have additional questions that we think about how we can utilize this survey. We started with implementing this survey with our veteran and first responder team, but we have a whole nother program department, our adaptive programs, that run programs for people with disabilities of all backgrounds. They are now implementing evaluation into their programs, which look a little bit different than our veteran and first responder program. So that idea of it being really steeped in our culture. And then, we are now just sharing the findings with the community. We've been working on this project for about 5 years. 2 of those years were a little bit eaten up with COVID. So now we're really 3 years into collecting data and have a large enough sample size to confidently show our results. So in that vein of sharing our findings with the community, I realized that this font is probably tiny, but this was a poster that we just presented at the International Veterans Mental Health Conference of the results of our survey. This first iteration of really diving into a large sample size and showing the impact that our program has. So you can see we presented on the short and long-term psychosocial outcomes associated with recreational therapy program for military veterans. And I wish this wasn't so tiny for all of you. I don't have these graphs as standalone, but you can see here in the middle are the charts of the 4 different measures. And what I think with this being tiny, what I want to focus on in larger form is just a little bit on the survey itself. What we did, our methods, was a quasi-experimental longitudinal study. Don't ask me to define that a whole lot more. That's the researchers, not me. But we studied our veteran participants, our first responder participants, and their significant others. That poster you saw was really focused on the veteran participants because of the audience that we were presenting to. As I mentioned, here are the outcomes that we measured and the specific peer-reviewed scales or assessments that we used. So like I mentioned earlier, new general self-efficacy, depression, anxiety, and stress scale, social connectedness scale, and a post-traumatic growth inventory. We did something called a retrospective pre-test and a post-test. Again, this is where having experts involved was really helpful. We learned through previous research that a more effective way to evaluate people than a pre-survey before they come and a post-survey at the end is to do one survey at the end of the program where they reflect on where they were before they arrived on the program and then answer where they feel like they are now. One, that's honestly just more time effective, but also there's studies that show that it's actually more accurate when you ask people to reflect back than when you ask people in the moment. A lot of times before someone's come on our program or on any of your programs, they might feel like they're doing great. They might answer those surveys without the real context of getting some education on some of the symptoms that they might be dealing with or seeing their own change over the course of the week. So at the end of our week-long program, we do a retrospective pre and post test. Then we follow up with them, like I mentioned, at 3 months, 6 months, and 12 months. Through the survey link is emailed out to them, but we also have an alumni coordinator who checks in with them via phone call at 3 months and at 12 months and via an email at 6 months. We also, in those covariates measured, so we looked at their scales, their scores on the scales against different things like, did age factor into how their scores come out? Does gender, rank, time since discharge, disability rating, other health service utilization, like are they seeking out mental health services? So that was some of the brilliant work that the statistician at UNC Wilmington did, thank goodness, because I can't imagine wrapping my head around that. So after all of our sample sizes were compiled and they looked at it, here's some of the things that we're learning. There were improvements in all measures across all 4. Participants were better off for their attendance in the program. We see, and I can go back to those graphs here in a second, sharp improvements from pre to post test, except for post-traumatic growth. We see improvements in post-traumatic growth. They aren't quite as dramatic as the other 3 measures. And that change is sustained over time. But what you'll see, and I'll go back to that tiny poster. Hopefully you can see this well enough, but here's our new general self-efficacy is this first one top left. You can see a really big spike up, drops down a little bit at 3 and 6 months, comes back up at 12 months, and they are always better off than before they came on the program. And that remains true across the other 4 measures as well. The difference being depression and anxiety, we see a decrease in their symptoms of depression and anxiety. Some of those symptoms start to come back up and then level off at the 12-month mark. Again, always improved from before the Higher Ground program. Social connectedness, steep incline, some regression here, always better off than their pretest measures. So they're better off for coming on the program, but at 3 and 6 and a year out from the program, some of those effects are impacted by the other things going on in their life. And then in looking at those covariates that I mentioned, the only one that really stood out was that we found that as they improved in the outcomes we measured, that was associated with lower health service utilization, meaning as their symptoms of depression and anxiety were reduced or their feelings of social connectedness were improved, they sought out less of the other health services in their life. So as they were feeling better, they didn't need to utilize that quite as much. There is no real correlation, however, between post-traumatic growth and that health service utilization. So some of the implications that came out of our research study is that it shows potential for recreational therapy to initiate and sustain psychosocial benefits for veterans alongside other health services. Basically, I would say in layman's term, recreational therapy really helps all of the efforts that our veterans and first responders are making. This one gets so I think steeped in research jargon, but while causality cannot be inferred, our program design aligns with the outcomes measured and demonstrates long-term positive outcomes for veterans. And there's a mechanism, we want to look into the mechanism to reduce that regression in outcomes at 3 and 6 months post-program. So one of the plans we have around that implication is we run a crew program where people continue to be active through higher ground programs after their week-long program. And we'd like to look at those people that are engaged in our crew programs and what their regression looks like as compared to those people who maybe don't participate in our crew program. So as you ask questions, what you learn is you have more questions to ask is basically I would say the long and short of that. So that's a little bit about our research. My intention in kind of covering some of that is I'm certainly proud of it and want to shout from the rooftop the great work that we're doing. But also I think in talking through what we're doing that might feed into some ideas around things that might work for your organization. So some questions I would pose to you all to think about as you maybe want to implement evaluation or make changes to the evaluations that you have are what goals in your program could you measure? So hopefully, you start, if you haven't already identified, but most of you, I imagine, have identified goals for your programs. Which of those might be useful to measure to show the impact that you're having? What are some of the ways that you could best measure them? Is that a survey like we did with some peer-reviewed measures? Is it interviews? Are there some other styles that would be useful for you to gather information about your program? And who could help you get there? I certainly know that we wouldn't have gotten where we are without the partnerships of UNCW and Clemson University with Brent and Jasmine. So who do you know could help you think about how to develop your evaluations, inform the process? I know a lot of people look to the Veterans Future Foundation. There's a lot of organizations out there that are interested and involved in helping to inspire evaluation among veteran programs. So Allison, when you're ready, I'll have you pop in our third poll. Did I skip a poll? I just realized.
Yeah, you did.
Thanks. Okay. I got rolling. My bad. Yeah. And then after this poll, I'd love to take some time to maybe hear from any of you, see if you have any questions rather than this. I've talked rapidly at you, and I'd be curious to see what this has brought up for people. Any questions, any thoughts that you have?
I'm going to go ahead and share this poll with everybody.
Thanks, Allison.
Can you see it?
Yes, I can see it. So I can see that about 30% of people are planning to talk to their team about evaluation. 25%, 24 technically, are ready to start or improve upon your survey. 18% are going to look into what free tools are available. 12% will try interviews or storytelling or create an evaluation plan. And 6% of you are not quite sure yet. Thank you all. So what questions do you guys have? And I'm going to stop the screen share here.
There's a question from Tenha from CDC Foundation. They have been doing a lot with evaluation. In fact, I have some stuff to share from them. So we're happy to have her today. But she says, as folks think about who can help them with getting started about evaluation, CDC Foundation has a toolkit designed to specifically help veteran organizations. And she put I was going to do that for you, Tanhaso, but thank you. So go ahead.
I would say if other people have resources as well, throw them in the chat. This is a great opportunity if anybody else has interacted with a resource that would be helpful. And then, sorry, Allison, I cut you off.
No, no, that's good. Yeah, definitely. There were also some questions that came in from registration. So, but I had one just when you were talking, it came up. I was just thinking, um, how long have you guys been working on this? It's amazing what you guys have been able to accomplish, but how long does this journey take typically? How long did it take you?
Yeah, so that's a great question, Allison. When we started this, we engaged in a 3-year contract with Brent and Jasmine. So, kind of in rough terms, that first year was really diving into, we had them come out, they each came out and shadowed one of our programs. So they saw like the meat and potatoes of what we do. They delved, as I mentioned, into our guidelines of practice. So that first year was really around developing the measure, really like getting what we do, how can we best measure it, and then working through the semantics of what measures we use. As I mentioned, we changed some of the measures as we learned. So then the second year at a high level is like starting to really put that into place. We went through 2 pilot phases. So we had an initial survey that we did for 6 months to a year before we realized like we switched from that community reintegration measure to the social connectedness measure. We also had some struggles around the post-traumatic growth measure. The questions, the way in which the questions were asked were challenging for the participants to understand. So we made some small edits that were in line with that still being a peer reviewed and like reliable measure to make it make sense to our participants. And then we went into pilot phase 2. Fortunately for us, pilot phase 2 stuck. Like we still are rolling with that pilot phase 2. And then that third year, again, this is like, I'm rough breaking this out, but that third year really went into assessing the results that were coming in and working through the statistics around, measuring it against those covariants, looking at the measures and showing those changes. We also built into that contract with those 2 researchers creating a publication around our research and presenting at a conference around our research. So that also went into year 3. It actually played out over 5 years because we started this conversation in 2019. And as many of you can imagine, suddenly a wrench was thrown in our gears. So we were working through creating the contract in 2019. We held off on really initiating that contract until it was safe to do so, I'll say. And it was a 3-year contract. We did recently extend that contract for 2 more years at a smaller scale so that they can help us to continue to parse through that data. But also, as I mentioned, we have an idea around an additional question of how these scores are impacted by this additional crew program that we run. So that extension was really for us to ask that question and make the case for how crew can be a meaningful add and can help us blunt that regression that we see at 3 and 6 months.
So crew was started to address that regression. Is that kind of?
Yes and no. Yeah, I mean, we started crew, and when we looked at that, we started crew because we wanted to enhance our follow-up because we knew that there was this big impact of the week-long program, and we touched base with them after that, but it wasn't as substantial as getting them back together in person. So we didn't yet have those measures. I think we already knew that we were seeing some tapering off after the program. And then our bias was confirmed, and luckily we already had balls rolling as ways to address that, that lag that happens after such a meaningful program and then the contact becoming so much lighter.
Okay, so everybody, please, if you want to, please add a question in, because otherwise I have a million questions, so I can just keep going. But if you would like to come off of mute too, you raise your hand. You can also just ask straight up if you don't want to type. Sometimes it gets too much to type it into the chat. So feel free to raise your hand if you have another question. But another question that came in through registration was, so how are organizations using their impact data to engage funders? And so this may be a question for not just you, but for other people in the audience that might have an answer for this. But here again, how have organizations used their impact data to engage funders?
I'll take a first stab at that, and I would very like I don't need to be the only one speaking. If there's other people who have experience, I want to say I would invite other voices. We're fairly early into having the numbers, but a big part of this plan is to seek out corporate sponsorship. So we've been identifying corporations that might be interested in helping to fund our program, and I think as many of you are probably aware, it's helpful to engage them with more concrete numbers than sometimes when we're engaging individual donors, for example. So coming to them with a deck, a packet that shows here's what we do, here's the impact that we have, really nailing the branding part of it as well, because I think when you're engaging corporations, this is about them also impacting their branding. So really showing that we've reached a level of sophistication that we can brand and market alongside them and show that real and meaningful impact that makes it easier for them to free up funding for us.
I see other people on this call that I know have done evaluation. So if any of you guys would like to chime in on how you have used your information to engage funders, please. Tana, have you seen any, do you have any suggestions, or have you seen any groups that have gone after funders after doing evaluation and given validity to their work?
Yeah, a lot of organizations that we support from the CDC Foundation. Alaina, just hearing you and your story was pretty amazing. It's exactly what we try to do with veteran-serving organizations through our mechanism. So thank you for coming and sharing. It's exciting to see you just talk about it. A lot of other VSOs that I've talked to have said that they do utilize their evaluation findings to just communicate better on how their program is actually achieving the outcomes that the funders are looking for. It's more of a storytelling mechanism. So they really use the impact data to say that, hey, we went out to do this and here's how we have been able to achieve that. And the more the funders see that you are not just using words, you're actually doing what you're saying you are doing, I think they're more willing to provide funds for it. And more funders I'm seeing are requiring that type of evaluation built in. So that piggybacks on a question I had maybe for Higher Ground or anyone else on the call too, is how have you been able to get funding for the evaluation activities? And do you have any tips for others who may be trying to find funding to do evaluation?
I think that was for you, Alaina.
Okay, I thought I'd wait and see if anybody wanted to chime in, but it was a conglomerate of funding, but we did, fortunately, I think in getting to know your donors and understanding who this might resonate with, I think that's really helpful. We had a foundation that had regularly shown an interest in our follow-up program. Like, I would say we were able to see that they had a sophisticated understanding of the importance of the long-term impact of our programs. And so they were someone that we were able, because of the relationship built, we were able to engage them on this initiative and get support in funding it. So I certainly am more the expert on the program side than the development side, but it's those relationships with your funders and understanding like what initiatives. There's some that love equipment. There's some that we do a recreation enhancement fund, which is it's a grant for every one of our participants to get equipment and or memberships at home. So it's grasping who has what interests and then telling the compelling story. I think most people now get that evaluation is important, and finding those funders that are willing to put money behind it was really helpful for us. And, there's some other funding organizations that show a lot of interest in that, in long-term impact, in measuring long-term impact, things like that.
Another question that had come in through registration were, what are some tips for collecting surveys?
Yeah, pester people. The surveys are hard to get back. Allison probably knows, just in doing this, she had to pester me a whole lot, and I'm like a invested and bought in party. But having, like I mentioned, that staff implementation guide and having staff that follow up and remind people. We try to capture the survey while we have them in person with us, which really helps. We have that set up where we're implementing this first survey, the retrospective pre and post test, while they're like physically present with us. And still, some people don't finish it while they're present with us. And so we follow up. We do at least 3 follow-ups before we start to think we might never capture that data. People will trickle off. You will not get anywhere near 100% response rate. And it trickles off at the 3 and the 6 month and the 12-month mark. But having thoughtful ways around thinking about the user experience, telling that compelling story early on while you have that captive audience, can really help to have people follow through. So, at the end of our program, we always have participants that are like, this was so amazing. They're really happy about it. They had a great time. They're like, we want to come back and volunteer. We want to do this. What can we do to help? And we're like, do the survey. I don't think it's the answer that they want to hear, but having staff really be able to speak to how this is actually the most beneficial thing they can do for us is to help us get the right response rate so we can have real evaluation of our program. So I'm not going to say it's easy. It takes a lot of hounding people. It's helpful for us that we have a person in the role that oversees sending this out and sends reminders. But it's having staff that get it and then having participants that get it, because you need the staff to send those reminders and to follow up with people and to track who did or didn't do it. And you need participants that are willing to wade through the tedium, because, in the importance of having reliable measures that Higher Ground didn't create, it means that every one of those measures has a different scale. Like, we printed it out, we built it into our workbook because as they're going through it, one of the measures is like a 1 through 3 scale. One of the measures is a 0 through 4 scale. One of them is a 1 through 4 scale. So as they go through it, it's confusing. Like, I won't sugarcoat that getting good measures means a lot of detail orientation. And so we thought about, okay, we have it in front of them in the book, because a lot of them will do it on their phone. We have a Qualtrics link. We also provide paper versions if someone doesn't feel tech savvy enough. Or doesn't, we do some programs that are outside of service. So we'll do paper versions and then our staff implement the data, or not implement, but input the data into our Qualtrics. So thinking about all the ways in which people would do it, having it set up to be as seamless as possible. It still isn't going to, if you're doing something like we did, which is have 4 different measures, it will not be seamless, but you can smooth over those speed bumps as best you can. So I think those pilot phases were helpful in us catching on to where our participants got caught up. And a big part of it was those changing measures. So we were like, let's get that in front of them. So it had each measure and it shows the scales so that they can kind of track the differences and have that while they're doing it on their phone. So just those thoughtful details that mean a lot of work and slow the process down, but can get you to a higher response rate.
Yeah, it's just meeting people where they are, right? And then trying to just make it as easy as possible.
Yep.
I just know that has been a thing for people to get surveys back. It is no easy feat.
Nope.
It makes sense to do it while you got a captive audience, at least talking to them there. So I appreciate you being here today. I am going to share the link that the CDC gave, and also I am going to put that is the one for the toolkit that Tanha spoke about just a minute ago, and I'm also going to put in the chat if I can ever find the chat again, because it seems to have disappeared at this point. Well, got to find it again. I have also here it is, a link to the RAN study. It's a RAN study on getting to the outcomes, plan and evaluation approach. So that's another resource to help people and organizations along their evaluation journey. So with that being said, I'm going to pass the ball back over to Jeanette. Jeanette, to thank you once again and close us out. So, well, we have Catherine Ray here. It's going to speak. So, go ahead, Jeanette.
All right. Well, Alaina, thank you so much for being here with us. That was a great presentation. I just love your energy. You seem like a very passionate person, and we definitely need folks like you in the veteran space. So thank you for all that you do and for being with us today. We appreciate you. And now we're going to have Catherine Ray from Progressive Insurance to talk about their Keys to Progress program. And I am going to turn that over to her so she can tell you all about it and how you can get folks connected to it.
Hello. Okay. Thank you so much, Jeanette and Allison. Yes, so we are in the middle of Progressive's Keys to Progress application. So Keys to Progress is something that Progressive puts on every year to give vehicles to veterans. We are looking this year to give away a vehicle in every state. So wanted to do a little update about where we're at. Our applications are open until August 1st, and we do give vehicles to veterans in need, as well as we do have a kind of commercial program as well. So we also give away vehicles to businesses owned by veterans, as well as nonprofits that need vehicles as well. And these can be a little bit of a commercial type. So if there's a specific need that a nonprofit needs, either for transporting veterans or some kind of food delivery, or depending on kind of what the nonprofit does, we can make modifications there, and they can put in requests for different kinds of vehicles. And then we try and match vehicles depending on the need of the veteran there. So you can get an application, like it does say there, by sending an email to keystoprogress@progressive.com, and the applications will list kind of all the documents that are needed for the application, as well as the requirements that the veterans need to meet in order to be qualified to apply. We are asking that a sponsor submit the application for the veteran this year. So anyone from a nonprofit or from the VA, or really, any kind of sponsor in a variety can submit an application on behalf of the veteran. It's open until August 1st. And just to kind of update on where we are right now, because I did ask, we do have a lot of applicants in California, Texas, and Georgia. But we are still looking for and in need of applications in all of our other states. So if you know anybody in those states, especially smaller states, sometimes in the Midwest, the Dakotas, we will get fewer applications from there. So really anywhere that you can kind of encourage and find, a veteran need to apply, we would really appreciate it. So we can hopefully meet our goal of all 50 states this year.
This is a really exciting program, and I encourage all of you, especially if you're not in one of the states that she described, to look at your population and see if you have any veterans that are in need of a vehicle. I do think one of the criteria, so correct me if I'm wrong, Catherine, one of the criteria is that they not already have a vehicle, or at least not have one that's functioning. So if you have transportation is such an issue with the veterans that we work with in the network, that I'm sure that our folks on the call today can help you in getting in some applications from some various states. Does anybody have a question for Catherine?
And it doesn't just have to be that they don't have a vehicle at all. They can have a vehicle, but older mile vehicles with really high mileage, they're not in kind of the financial position. They're, worried about when it's going to run out, or, don't have a position if something happens to it that, they're going to be able to do anything with it. So they can have a vehicle, but just, older miles kind of in need kind of situation. So, and then I can put in the chat my email as well, so that if you have any questions about the program, you can email me directly as well. But the keys to progress at progressive.com will send you the application, and you can submit the applications there as well.
Any questions?
Thanks, everybody.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Catherine, for that. We do appreciate you letting us know about that fantastic program. So we're going to sign off now, but before we do, I want to be sure you all know about our upcoming symposium. This is our 12th annual symposium. It will be held August 5th and 6th in Washington, D.C. at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. If you are interested in participating, you can go to our website and sign up. So please do that. If you are interested, you can attend virtually or you can attend in person, of course. So thank you all for collaborating and sharing today. America's Warrior Partnership partners with communities to improve veterans' quality of life, thereby reducing veterans' death by suicide or self-harm. We believe that communities are best equipped to improve the veterans' quality of life, and our goal at AWP and our goal today is to provide community partners like yourselves with support, information, and best practices to help you deliver quality services to veterans in your community. Our next Battle Rhythm will be on July 7th, and the topic will be resilience building, developing mental toughness after service. So that sounds like that will be very interesting, so we hope that you all can attend. Thank you, and welcome summer.
Thanks, everybody.